It is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Raymond Singer. Dr. Singer learned his emotional intelligence about women's hearts first as a son, then as a husband, a son-in-law, the father of 2 daughters, and ultimately a heart surgeon. Since completion of his clinical training and for the past 20 years, Dr. Singer has been on staff at Lehigh Valley Health Network, where he has performed more than 5,700 heart and lung surgeries, just a few. Guess he knows what he's doing. At Lehigh Valley Health Network, Dr. Raymond Singer is the chief of the Division of Cardiothoracic Surgery and Associate Medical Director of the network's Heart and Vascular Center. He is also a clinical professor of surgery at the University of South Florida. Beyond his medical credentials, Dr. Singer earned a Master of Medical Management degree from Carnegie Mellon University in 2009. He is also a certified physician executive. Both credentials position him well for healthcare leadership in an age of reform. Dr. Singer enjoys teaching and writing and has published more than 70 scientific and news journal articles when he's not performing those 5,700 surgeries. Locally, some of you may recognize his name from his frequent opinion page essays in various local newspapers. Clinical and academic achievements aside, another way to view a surgeon is through the eyes of his patients, of course. Some have joined us today. One patient who was described by Dr. Singer as a young woman mentioned how he restored her zest for life so she can bike, hike, sail, and ski again. This post-surgical patient is very actively enjoying life at 60 years young. And another patient with 2 previous unsuccessful heart surgeries couldn't get any doctor to really listen to her until she met Dr. Singer. Prior to the surgery, she was losing hope. After her 3rd and successful surgery, this patient has lost 35 pounds, goes on a 3-mile bike ride, or she went on one for the first time in years, and she is happy to be dancing again. This is quite a resume, huh? Mine does not sound this good. As he speaks today from his heart to ours, please give a Go Red welcome to cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Raymond Singer. Dr. Singer.
Good afternoon, and I want to thank Eve for that wonderful introduction and welcome all of you here today. Eve mentioned that she wakes up at 2 in the morning to get to work. So Eve, you and I have a lot in common because as a heart surgeon, I'm up at 2 in the morning and 3 in the morning and 4 in the morning and 5 in the morning. I should call you. We can text each other, just not when we're driving from Conshohocken, right? I actually had the privilege of being interviewed by Eve on WMFZ Channel 69 News. Eve had me on to talk about Barbara Walters' heart valve surgery. I didn't perform Barbara Walters' surgery, but I wrote a nice piece in the Morning Call. And by design, Eve and I decided that I would come onto the set wearing scrubs so that it would look authentic. And the segment went well. You know, I think, what was it about? You gave me, what, about 13 seconds? No. But no, it was a couple of minutes. It went well. And at the end of it, when we broke for commercial, I said to Eve, I said, you know, who knows? Maybe this will help launch my career as the next Dr. Oz. Well, I'm sorry to say, Eve, that apparently that hasn't panned out because I'm still up at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning performing heart surgery. So, but who knows? Perhaps this nice invitation today by the American Heart Association will give me a second chance at launching my career in show business. And actually, it turns out that I know Dr. Oz. Mehmet Oz and I went to medical school together at the University of Pennsylvania, and in the 1990s, we actually had Dr. Oz out at Lehigh Valley Hospital. There was a symposium that I organized each year called the Update on Heart and Lung Surgery. And Dr. Oz was a transplant surgeon at Columbia University in New York. And we had him out here speaking about that. Now, by amazing coincidence, just this past weekend, I was in New York at Columbia University. Our team of doctors, cardiologists, and cardiac surgeons at Lehigh Valley Hospital were being trained in the new so-called transcatheter aortic valve replacement procedure. That's a procedure where we're going to be replacing valves without opening up the patient. And so I was in Dr. Oz's old stomping grounds. Now, I didn't run into Dr. Oz, but I got to the hotel early, and I don't usually get to watch TV during the day, but I turn on the TV, and sure enough, who's on TV? Dr. Oz with the Dr. Oz Show. Now, what was an amazing coincidence, of course, he was talking about, not surprisingly, women's heart health and dieting and exercise. And I was a little dismayed because I was listening to some of the advice that my old friend was giving, and it'd be kind of laughable if it weren't so serious. And you can check this out on his website, because I did when I came home. And I don't know how many of you watched the Dr. Oz Show last Thursday. Don't raise your hands. I don't want to know. But no, it's an entertaining show. But he had this woman on named Nellie. And Nellie, you know, obviously wanted to lose weight. And the title of the show was Fast Fat Burners. Now, here's what his advice was. You can't make this stuff up. His advice was to Nellie that he wanted her to eat a cup of beans for each meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, a cup of beans for a week. Now, I'll tell you, I don't know how much weight she's going to lose, but she's going to lose a lot of friends, because I know what beans do to me, okay? And you can just ask my wife. But then, oh, no, it's just, I just don't. And another woman he had on, he was advocating eating this shellfish protein mix that I guess he sells. And I can tell you that there's absolutely no way that any of this will work, either short-term or long-term. Maybe short-term, but certainly not long-term. And what we're going to talk about today is such a beautiful, simple concept of what I refer to as the 3 E's, which is just eating, exercise, and emotion. And I promise you that this will work long time. Before we get to that, I do want to thank the American Heart Association for having me speak today and talk about this beautiful concept about your inner candle. That's why you had a candle in your invitation. It's actually part of a concept of a book that I'm writing, and hopefully I'm going to finish this summer. In fact, I probably should lay off my criticism of Dr. Oz, because I'm hoping he'll write the foreword and get me on his TV show so I can sell millions of copies, and then I don't need to be up at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. But there have been so many people that work so hard to make today happen. Of course, all of the committee members, but again, I want to thank Winnie Melinsky, who's the Highmark chairperson for the Go Red, Carly Hood, who is our new senior director, and 2 very special people who worked so hard. Diane Skowronski and Anne-Marie Crown really did such a fabulous event today. I, too, would like to congratulate the award winners, the Women of Heart, Leslie Bilowich, who was the heart survivor, who had irregular heartbeat, and after successful ablation surgery, she's enjoying life. Deborah Mulroy, who takes care of her 2 children, and my good friend Karen Nushki, who, I have to say, Karen, 31 years as a nurse. I think we would all agree Karen looks as youthful today as she did when she graduated nursing school. And in fact, as a nice segue, today's talk is entitled The Preservation of Youth. So maybe, Karen, you could be our poster child today. And before we get into this, I also want to introduce to you, and it's a big part of the talk today, some very, very special guests today. First and foremost, I'd like to introduce to you the woman who lit my inner candle some 22 years ago, my wife, Bonnie. And I'll tell you, Bonnie's a real trooper, because the last couple of days she's been a little under the weather, and she toughed it out, and she was here today. Normally she gets sick after I speak, not before, but today she's with Bonnie today are 2 very special young ladies, my daughters, who are very excited that Daddy was invited to speak at the American Heart Association, because both of them got out of school today. And both of them have birthdays coming up in May. First, on May 29th, my Lana Michelle is going to become 13 years old. Lana, she can wave. And she's going to have her bat mitzvah on June 2nd. And my soon-to-become double-digit 10-year-old Julia Brooke, Julia. And also here today is a woman who I guess you could say pretty comfortably has known me my entire life, my mother, the youthful 89-year-old, she told me not to say that, Gertrude Singer. My mother, 89 years young, comes from that generation that Tom Brokaw so eloquently talked about, the greatest generation. My mother survived growing up through the Great Depression, and then she served honorably in the Navy in World War II. When my mother came back from the war, she met my father, who was a Marine, and they raised 2 children. My older sister, Diane, is a high school teacher in Cinemas, New Jersey. Couldn't be here today because they're giving SATs. My mother is a heart survivor. At age 77, my mother underwent aortic valve replacement surgery and 2 bypasses. That was when she was 77, and now she's 89, and she is doing very well. The other thing to know about my mom is that she worked full-time until the age of 86. And the only reason she stopped working at the age of 86 is because she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, which she has also beaten. 3 years later, there is absolutely no signs of cancer anywhere. My mother continues to be incredibly active. She is a LifeMaster bridge player. She has a better social life than me, which really isn't saying very much. But she not infrequently travels to New York, and unfortunately, she still drives, which means on Sundays, she lives in Philadelphia, she continues to drive down to the casinos to deliver my inheritance to Donald Trump. So that's one downside to her being so socially active. Also here today is my mother-in-law, Brenda Schlenger, Bonnie's mom. And we have this on videotape, so I want to say this since Mother's Day is coming up on May 13th. So Brenda, I just want to tell everybody that I love my mother-in-law. How about that? And yeah. And you know what they say, behind every successful man is a surprise mother-in-law. So I have today here some very, very special women. First, I have a couple nurses who I've worked with for a long time, one of which is Janie Pearson, who is the beloved nurse practitioner for the Lehigh Valley Heart and Lung Surgeons, and who in this very room in 2010 won the Pennsylvania Nurses Association Award for courage, commitment, and compassion. Now, Janie is not only special in every way. You know how they say everybody's replaceable? Janie is not replaceable. She is a survivor. She has survived 3 brain operations for a benign but relentless brain tumor, and she is just one of the most special people in the world, about the most special nurse you'll ever meet, Janie Pearson. Now maybe as we go forward, because we're going to introduce some other, maybe you can stand up because I think it's probably hard to see who everybody is. So just in time to embarrass my 2 scrub nurses. There's Janie, yay. Now my two scrub nurses are here today. There are many scrub nurses, but 2 who have stood by my side for all of those 5,700 operations. And I know that some of you who work at Lehigh Valley Hospital are saying, oh my God, there's a special place in heaven for these 2 women. These women and so many scrub nurses I refer to as the quiet heroes behind the masks. You know, you get to know your floor nurse, you get even to know your intensive care nurse, but when you go in the operating room, you typically don't get to really meet, or get to know at least, your scrub nurses. And these are 2 very, very special women, Lois Kleppinger and Lori Fuhrer. Can you stand, guys? Now lastly, I have some very special women here today who actually I performed open heart surgery on, and who are all doing well. I certainly didn't bring any of the ones who aren't doing well. Right? That would have been a bad thing. Not good for your career, you know. But these are really special women who have undergone successful open heart surgery. And if you could each stand, first I'd like to introduce Ann Lewis. Ann Lewis is an associate professor of performing arts right here at DeSales, and she was supposed to be giving a final exam today, but I went into her class and I told the kids, I said, look, this is now going to be a take-home open book exam, so your professor can come to lunch today. But Ann, they liked me very much in that class. Ann, at the young age of 40-something, I won't say what, underwent very complex mitral valve repair in 2007 and is doing well. Also here today is Priscilla Eckert with her two daughters who are very dear friends of mine, Kate Janice and Maggie Siliberti. Kate and Maggie aren't going to stand? No? Okay. Priscilla is a breast cancer survivor who then, at the age of 74, underwent successful aortic valve replacement and is doing very well. Now, Dorothy Beasley is here. Dorothy. Now, I can tell you that Dorothy Beasley had her surgery on October 29, 2008. And let me tell you why I know that exact date, because that was Game 5 of the Philadelphia Phillies World Series. Now, her surgery was supposed to be on Monday, the 27th. And that was supposed to be Game 5. And if any baseball fans are here, you would know that in 2008, the Phillies won the World Series in Game 5. But that Game 5, which was supposed to be Monday the 27th, is the only game in World Series history that was suspended because of rain in the 6th inning. And I had asked Mrs. Beasley if it was okay to move her surgery to Wednesday because I wanted to go to the game, and she was fine with that. And guess when the game was postponed to? That Wednesday. So here I am negotiating with her, and she said, you know what, do a good job at the surgery. Your partners will take care of me. I'll watch you on TV. And that's what we did. Her surgery was in the morning. The Phillies won the World Series, and she's done well. Actually, she's doing better than the Phillies are doing right now. Janine Ellie. You can stand, Janine. Janine Ellie, at the young age of 32, when she was a single mom with a child only 3 years old, had severe mitral valve prolapse. And by the way, I'm also happy to mention that Janine now has just gotten married, again, 2 months ago, right? And now it's Janine Smith. But Janine, at the age of 32, was diagnosed as having anemia. And I think this underscores what we're going to talk about today with women and heart health. It's not that she didn't have anemia, but she also had underlying severe mitral valve disease. Fortunately, she had a physician, happened to be a woman physician, who knew that there was something more going on and realized that she had heart trouble that was contributing to this anemia and not just be written off as anemia. And Janine underwent successful mitral valve repair in 2009 and is doing wonderfully today. Lorraine Panaccio, recently in December, where's Lorraine? Lorraine? She underwent successful aortic valve replacement, right? Aortic valve replacement, just this past December. And I got a postcard 8 weeks later with her skiing in Vail down a mountain, which I'm not sure I would recommend to everybody, but I thought it was rather striking that 8 weeks after open heart surgery, she decided to strap on the skis in Vail and go 60 miles an hour down a mountain. Last but not least is Michelle Santunis. Michelle, do you want to stand? Now, you have probably heard her story in the newspaper and on radio, and hopefully maybe now on television. At the young age of 38, while she was living in Rochester, New York, she had severe mitral valve prolapse, like a lot of the women you heard about today. And she underwent a mitral valve repair operation, and after the operation, she didn't feel well. Things just weren't right. But she had great difficulty convincing her doctors that something was wrong. They said that she was fine. Then they told her she was getting too emotional. Sometimes we hear this, right, when women present with symptoms. It took a year for her to convince her doctors that, in fact, something was indeed seriously wrong, and unfortunately, the mitral valve repair had failed. And so she went in for a second operation at the age now of only 39. And what they did was they took down the repair and they replaced her valve with a biological valve, a pig valve, which at age 39 probably isn't the most common choice of valve, but then on top of it, they place a rather small valve. And so there was a mismatch between the size of the valve and what she needed for her body. Now, Michelle's husband had moved. They had moved to a couple places, but there she was again trying to convince doctors that something was not right. And she was told she was emotional, and she was told that she was histrionic, and that it was all in her head. She was actually recommended to see psychiatrists. And then finally she moved to this area, and fortunately she was seen by the Lehigh Valley heart specialists at Lehigh Valley Hospital, Amy Onhart's group, Dr. Rossi, Dr. Martinez, and it was actually on Thursday night, it was the night before Rosh Hashanah, a holiday that I celebrate, and I was called by Dr. Bruce Feldman to come see Michelle because Bruce told me that she would need a third-time operation, and she wanted to go to the Cleveland Clinic. And I came in and I saw Michelle. And I listened to her story for about 2 hours. And I said to her, Michelle, you're not going to the Cleveland Clinic. And the simple reason she wasn't going to the Cleveland Clinic is, quite frankly, I don't think she would have been able to make the trip. In fact, Michelle was having difficulty walking from the bed to the bathroom in the hospital. She was ashen. She was blue. She really was not doing well. And I held Michelle's hand, and I said, you're the one that's supposed to get upset, not me today. And I said, Michelle, I said, our team can help you. Our team of Janie and Lois and Lori and all of the fine cardiologists and all the fine people that work throughout the hospital and all the different teams, the heart specialists, the heart care group, and so on and so forth, that we can help you. We can help you. And so the next day, Michelle underwent a remarkable third-time open heart procedure at the young age of 49. And what my partner, Dr. Sidlowski, and I did was we had to take out the old valve that wasn't working and literally reconstruct the inside of her heart because it was so damaged. We had to patch things. And then we did an electrical procedure to restore her back to a normal heart rhythm. And now she refers to her life as in living color, her inner candle lit once more, where her life before was just in shades of gray. So, Michelle. I'm sure that all of these fine women will be happy to talk to you about their experiences in more detail afterwards, and you can pick them out because they have little nice red corsages that, that Bonnie and I got for them so that you can seek them out afterwards and talk to them. Now, if you were expecting today slides on the latest heart valve technology or some gory pictures from the operating room, I'm sorry, but you're going to be disappointed. But if you do want to see that stuff, I do have a website. It's and you don't need a pen, but if you remember, it's www.heartlungdoc.com, or if you just Google Dr. Raymond Singer, comes up on the top of the list. But what we want to talk about today is your inner candle. We want to talk about how to preserve that candle, how to preserve your how to preserve your youth and keep that candle lit. And the funny thing is about all this is that everything you need to know is going to be in this very simple concept of 3 E's: eating, exercise, and emotion. Now, some of you are probably sitting there saying, are you kidding me? Is that it? I came all the way out here and he's going to talk about eating, exercise, and emotion. I mean, I know that much. Do you? Do you really? Do you really think you know about it? Because I'll tell you something. Most of us don't. And you know how I know most of us don't? Because I don't. Because I don't get it. At least I haven't really gotten it through most of my life. In fact, in many ways, I've been a failure. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I've got all these nice letters by my name, you know, MD, MMM, CPE, FACS, FACC, FACP, whatever it is. My dad was always jealous, may he rest in peace, because he didn't finish 10th grade. And he used to sign his name, Al Singer, HSDO, high school dropout. Because he wanted letters by his name. But see, the thing is, I spent my entire life training to be a heart surgeon, right? So I studied really hard in high school to get into a good college, really hard in college to get into a good medical school to get into residency to become fellow to become a heart surgeon to make partner to get some administrative role or whatever the future may bring. And all that time, including getting married and having kids, what did I forget to do? I forgot largely how to take care of myself. So I guess in some ways we could talk about today as this being doctor, heal thyself, or do as I say, not as I do. In fact, I mentioned that I'm writing a book, and let me just share with you the first couple lines of that book. The book starts out by saying, "This book is written for me. If any of you happen to benefit from anything on these pages, terrific. But the person who would benefit the most by reading this book is its author." And I think that most of you are probably in the same position. See, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a nurse, if you're a lawyer or a business person, if you're a teacher or you're a homemaker. If you have worked hard, if you are successful at what you do, and particularly if you participate in raising a family, which, you know, is a big part of what women have to do, then most likely you're in the same boat as me. But the good news is there really is there really are some very simple concepts about eating, exercise, and emotion that will make you feel better. And you don't need to eat beans for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You don't have to have a shellfish protein diet. You don't have to measure your diet or a liquid diet. There's absolutely nothing you need to do except think about these very simple concepts. Now, what's amazing about this is that these concepts have been around here forever. And I don't mean like years or 10 years or 20 years. I'm talking about hundreds of years, thousands of years. Doctors have been writing about this since the time of Hippocrates. And it's really amazing. Now, I love history, and if any of you read any of the essays I've written in the morning call, you know that I always talk about history first. Well, there was one particular physician who lived about 900 years ago. His name was Maimonides. Happened to be a Jewish sage. In fact, there's a hospital center in New York called Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York. And there's an association here in Allentown called the Maimonides Society, who happens to be a group of Jewish physicians, but it's actually started in Allentown, and now it's known nationally. But what he also was, besides being a physician, he was a philosopher. He was a writer, and in his later years, he wrote 10 medical textbooks. And he was well ahead of his time. He believed in cultural tolerance and humane care. In fact, there's just one quote he had in his textbook. He writes, "The physician should not treat the disease, but rather the patient who is suffering from it." Isn't that wonderful? Think that that was written 900 years ago. Well, guess what one of his books were that was written at the end of his life, at the end of his career? It was called The Preservation of Youth. And in that book, The Preservation of Youth, he talked about, guess what? 3 simple concepts: nutrition, physical exercise, and what he referred to as having the right mental attitude, which is just our 3 E's: eating, exercise, and emotion. So let's talk about it. Let's start with eating. Maimonides was serving as a physician in Cairo, in Egypt. And he was working for this self-indulgent prince who, because of his poor eating habits, had developed a lot of medical ailments like digestive problems and arthritis and things like that. And it's interesting, if you think about it, in today's world, many of us have gotten accustomed to what they refer to as the Western diet, right? A diet that's very rich in fats and meats. And if you think about it, in days of old, those kinds of diets were only available to royalty. So in many ways, as we have become more affluent as a society, we have developed a lot of the ailments and diseases that were only available to the royalty in the past. Now, what this doctor wrote about 900 years ago, as far as nutrition, and Anne-Marie mentioned it actually, he stressed the importance of eating whole grains as the foundation of a solid diet, and he explicitly warned the prince to avoid refined flours and sugars. But most of all, 900 years ago, he condemned overeating and gluttony as the main source of all illness. It's amazing stuff. I mean, imagine how much healthier we would be if we just followed this. So let's talk about what we do today. I need a show of hands. How many of you are on a diet today? Come on. How many of you have ever been on a diet? Yeah, there you go. Failure here. I have been on many diets. There's just about no diet that you can't mention. Of course, there are many diets out there. The one that was mentioned today is Weight Watchers, which is the most popular and maybe arguably isn't really a diet, and have to give them credit. But then there's the notorious Nutrisystem from Philadelphia, where I'm from. I was on that 2, maybe 3 times. But you see that being out. That was a guy by the name of, what was his name? It was, blanking on his name now, but he started this in about 1971 in Philadelphia. Just to give you an idea, by 1989, Nutrisystem had $800 million a year in revenues. Okay, but then there's some other diets, okay? There's the Atkins diet, South Beach, Sugar Busters, Jenny Craig, Ornish, Pritikin Zone, Cambridge, Sonoma, Medifast, Abs diet, the apple cider vinegar diet, which, by the way, my mother-in-law tried that one, right, Brenda? The Beverly Hills diet, the Biggest Losers Club, the Bikini Boot Camp, which actually that one doesn't sound too bad to me, I don't know. The chocolate diet, the cookie diet, the Diet Divas, Grapefruit diet, LA weight loss, Oprah diet, now the Mehmet Oz diet, peanut butter diet, Slim Fast, and even the E diet, which I guess you just eat your laptop computer instead of having lunch or something, I don't know. And this is not even a complete list, okay? It really goes on and on. So here's the thing. What is wrong with dieting? I'll tell you what's wrong with dieting. The very word diet is what's wrong with dieting. Because if you go on a diet, that implies that you are going to go off a diet. And one of the problems with these fad diets is that you typically lose weight very quickly, and then when you go off the diet, you actually get heavier and heavier. You get fatter and fatter. And you say, oh, I don't know, I've heard that, but it does happen. And let me explain how that happens. And the way it happens is the typical adult, can only lose about 2, maybe 2.2 pounds a week. So let's say 2.5 pounds a week. That would be about the most you can lose and stay healthy. When you lose more than about 2.5 pounds per week, your body basically goes into a starvation mode. And in order to maintain the sugar in your blood, your body breaks down protein. It's a very inefficient process known as gluconeogenesis. And you break down protein so that you can maintain the sugars in your blood. Where does that protein come from? It comes from your liver, it comes from your muscles, muscles in your leg, muscles in your heart. Okay. So then what happens is you go off the diet. And invariably when you go off the diet, you go back to taking in more calories than you work off. And guess what? The body only knows how to store calories in one form. What's that? Fat. Okay, so here's how the vicious cycle works. You go on a fad diet, you lose weight, I get that, you lose weight, you lose fat, but you also lose protein. And then you go off the diet and you gain back just fat. And sadly, millions of Americans are going through this every year, while the authors of a lot of these books and television hosts and makers of these diets are making millions of dollars. So what's the answer? Well, try something really simple. Before you put something in your mouth, just ask yourself a simple question. Is this good for me, or is this bad for me? As Maimonides said, is it whole grains and fruits? Good. Fried chicken and just about anything you get at a fast food restaurant? Probably not so good. But most of all, do not overeat. This gentleman, Maimonides, wrote 900 years ago the following. This is from his book, The Preservation of Youth. One should never eat except when hungry, One should not keep on eating until one's stomach is filled, but leave about a fourth part of one's appetite unsatisfied. He goes on to say that excessive eating is to the body of a person like deadly poison and is the root of all diseases. Maimonides wrote, "The less one eats, the more beneficial, endowing strength to the body and clarity to the mind." I mean, we simply cannot improve on these recommendations 900 years later. But the difference is that you have to be it, and it has to become you. You have to take away the word diet and put in its place permanent lifestyle change. Okay? It can no longer be diet. You have to have a vision of what you want to appear like from a physique standpoint, and just direct yourself to that, asking yourself those very simple, fundamental questions and maintaining moderation. So let's look at exercise. This is what this great writer wrote 900 years ago. While criticizing the prince's sedentary lifestyle, this Maimonides fellow repeatedly advocated daily, vigorous exercise. Let me emphasize that word daily. He said that without day-to-day exercise, the human body systematically loses its ability to cope with the rigors of life. He writes, day-to-day exercise is the main principle of keeping one's health and in the repulsion of all illnesses. Let me ask you another question, show of hands. How many of you exercise today? How many of you exercise every day? Every day? Why not? Why not? You shower every day, right? I mean, you brush your teeth every day, right? You go to the bathroom every day. Hey, you're going in there again? Oh my God. Why is it that you feel comfortable showering every day? Or I should say, you wouldn't feel comfortable if you didn't shower every day. But you somehow feel comfortable not exercising today or every day. The point is that, again, just like eating, you must decide that it's a part of your life. It has to be as regularly a part of your life, just like taking a shower and, quite frankly, eating every day. Now, I personally like to exercise in the morning because it's one of the few times that I'm typically not interrupted. But I think more importantly, I find that exercise in the morning, even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes, I feel a little bit more alive for the day. You see how I said only 15 to 20 minutes? Because I'm not advocating that you go out and buy, go to a gym, buy a, year thing on the gym, or hit the treadmill for 60 minutes. Because I'll be honest with you, at 54 years old, my knees and my hips, my back, my neck, and just about every part of me couldn't handle a treadmill. I mean, I did get one of those elliptical machines because there's, no real weight on that. Another one, I just saw an advertisement for a couple $100 you can get a stationary bike from Schwinn. But really, only 15 to 20 minutes is all you really need to feel better. But here's a better suggestion. There are countless opportunities all day long in your daily life to exercise. Let me give you some examples. Whether you work at the hospital or some corporate organization, or quite frankly, if you're walking to the mall, why take the escalator? Why take the elevator? If you're working at the hospital, none of this one up and two down business. If there's 4 or 5 flights of stairs, walk it. And quite frankly, at the hospital, 2 things will happen. One is you'll get there more quickly, because if you wait for an elevator at the hospital, you're going to get old really quickly, okay? But the other thing is you'll be amazed. You do that all day long. You just take that option of taking the stairs instead of an elevator or escalator. You'd be surprised how that little bit of exercise really makes a difference. How about when you go to the airport? Now, no matter how early we get to the airport, we can get to the airport 3 hours early. As soon as we get past security, Bonnie immediately says, we're going to the gate. I'm like, why do we have to go to the gate? Well, I don't know if the gate's going to be there. And Bonnie, if the gate isn't there, we're in big trouble. But that's the routine we've been doing for 22 years. We got to go to the gate. But that's not the problem. The problem is, why do we take that walking sidewalk? I mean, why not go around and just take that extra moment to have a brief, brisk walk? How about Wegmans? How many of you drive around for 20 minutes trying to find that perfect spot up front at Wegmans? I mean, come on. I would suggest you to actually park as far away as you can and take that as yet another opportunity to walk. But my favorite one is what I refer to as the Dunkin' Donut phenomenon. I mean, it's bad enough people are going to Dunkin' Donuts to get coffee and donuts, you know, basically getting caffeine and fat, but they line up in their cars, you know, 6, 7 cars deep. They'll wait a half hour so they don't have to get out of their car, okay? When they could just park and walk, you know, and besides that, again, just like the elevator, you're probably going to get your coffee and donuts a little quicker. The point is that there really are countless opportunities to exercise in your daily life if you just look around and think about it. But again, it has to be in your mind. You have to think about it. It has to be a part of you, and you have to be a part of it. Now, the final part, and it gets to this whole concept of the inner candle, is what Maimonides talked about, having the right attitude. This gentleman stressed that our emotions play a vital role in affecting our physical well-being, and he specifically identified chronic anger, worry, and sadness as particularly destructive. In this light, he suggested that periodic soul-searching and inward stock-taking are crucial elements of proper health maintenance. Often our ethical conduct, the way we treat others around us, is an important indicator of our true health, which I guess Congress must be pretty sick then, I guess. But indeed, he regarded people who act in habitually unethical ways as suffering from an inner sickness that requires serious diagnosis and healing. What this gentleman understood 900 years ago is that there is a continuum between our physical, our emotional, and our spiritual health. Interestingly, this is what Maimonides' recommendation was to other physicians in treating patients. He wrote in this book, Preservation of Youth, "In order to strengthen the patient's vital powers, one should employ musical instruments and tell patients happy stories that make the heart swell, narratives that will distract the mind and cause patients and their families to laugh. One should select as attendants caretakers who can cheer up the patient." I mean, talk about Press-Ganey scores, right? For those of you in medicine know what I mean. This is amazing stuff. And it's amazing stuff because it would take another 900 years for physicians to begin to accept that there was a relationship between the mind and physical disorders. One of the most common questions my patients ask me is, "Doctor, was my heart attack caused by stress?" Now, I used to say, well, it doesn't cause the blockages, but it certainly doesn't help. I'll be honest with you. What I have learned from my patients and from years of reading and thinking about this is that my answer didn't go far enough. I truly believe that stress is a direct cause of heart disease. Just recently, I treated a 67-year-old woman. She was in the hospital for lung problems. She wasn't in for heart problems. She had a history of anxiety, and at 3 in the morning, she had a panic attack. And she got very, very short of breath. And she got so short of breath, we had to put her on the breathing machine. And we got an EKG, an electrocardiogram, and it looked as if she had severe damage to her heart. So we called our friends and the cardiologists in the heart care group, and they immediately rushed her to the cardiac catheterization lab. And to our surprise, her coronary vessels were completely normal, but her heart muscle was ballooned out like an aneurysm, as if she had suffered a massive heart attack. And we realized immediately what was wrong. She had what is known as stress-induced cardiomyopathy, also known as Takotsubo syndrome. Now, this syndrome was not really characterized until 1991 in Japan. Takotsubo is an octopus pot. It has a narrow neck and a big bowl. I guess the octopus would get in and couldn't get out. And that's what the woman's heart looked like. It was very narrow at the base, and then it ballooned out like an aneurysm. And it's a very serious disorder. And in fact, you can die from this, which gives credence to this concept of, dying of a broken heart. It turns out that this syndrome typically occurs in middle-aged or older women who have suffered a great loss, like the loss of a spouse. When they had Hurricane Katrina, there was a very touching and very sad story about this husband and wife who were trapped in their house. And as the waters rushed up, they went up to the attic. and he was holding her, and she died in his arms. Again, possibly being literally scared to death. So how does this happen? Well, it turns out that when we are under stress, we have a surge of chemicals in our bodies that are released known as catecholamines. You may be familiar with the most common one, which is adrenaline. And what adrenaline does, it makes your blood pressure go up, and it makes your heart beat faster, and it's part of a natural phenomenon known as the fight or flight phenomenon. Now, why do we have this? Well, we have this because back in the days when we were cavemen and cave women, we would be chased by saber-toothed tigers. We were lunch, basically. And we would need to either fight the tiger or the other cave person that was fighting us, or we could run. Personally, I would probably have run. But, so what happens is you get these chemicals, and your pupils will dilate. The concept is you would see better. Blood would be shunted away from your gut to your legs, because you don't need to eat at that moment. You need to run. You sweat profusely, the thinking being that you became more slippery, I guess, and wouldn't be caught by the tiger. And your heart would pump more vigorously to make sure that, that the body had the oxygen demands that it's needed. The problem is that we are no longer chased by saber-toothed tigers. Only metaphorically so. Only metaphorically so. And there lies the problem. In today's modern times, our bodies still react to stress the same way it did when we were cavemen and cave women. The problem is the physical threat typically is no longer there, only the perceived emotional threat. Only the perceived emotional threat. So in the absence of any real physical threat, all of these chemicals just build up in the bloodstream, and they actually embed themselves into the muscle, not the least of which is the heart muscle, and there have been studies that have shown that these chemicals can cause direct damage to the myofibrils. As a heart surgeon, this worries me terribly, because a heart surgeon really is never off duty. I mean, we have a call schedule and all that, but the fact of the matter is, you do open heart surgery on the person that morning, you're on call that night. In fact, you're really on call that weekend. You're on call basically until that patient goes home. And Bonnie can tell you that for the last 25 years, I have slept with a pager by my bedside. There's a fascinating book written by a cardiologist. He was 43 years old. His name was Dr. Robert S. Elliott. It was written in the 1980s. It's called Is It Worth Dying For? And at the age of 43, he suffered a heart attack. And he really didn't have very many risk factors except possibly stress. And so while he was recovering from his heart attack, he studied this stress phenomenon. He actually developed what is known as the Life Stress Simulation Laboratory at the University of Nebraska. And what he found was something very interesting. One particular study they did was they took, guess what? Surgeons. And they measured their blood pressures at rest, and then they measured their blood pressures again during stressful surgeries. And of course, what they found was that these surgeons' blood pressures, which was seemingly normal at rest, shot up to dangerously high levels while they operated. And guess what? It's not so much the high blood pressure that is really dangerous, it's that change. It's that delta going from normal to high. In medicine, we call it the DPDT, or the change in pressure over time. It's those shearing forces that can really cause damage to the muscle and to the tissues. So for example, my own pulse rate is normally about 50. And my systolic blood pressure rarely goes over 100. But when is that measured? It's measured when I'm sitting in my good friend Dr. Rossi's office. He's my cardiologist. I'm relaxed. We're talking about how the Mets stink and the Phillies are good, or whatever we're talking about the day. Not this year, unfortunately. We're talking about the reverse. But then I go into the operating room, and Lois and Lori, my scrub nurses, can tell you just how high my blood pressure and pulse can get in the operating room. In fact, they can tell you exactly when my blood pressure and pulse is going to go up and exactly how I respond to that situation. And perhaps even worse than that is that Lori and Lois can tell you in the first minute or two in the morning when I walk in the operating room how that case may go. You see, because we're all human. I may have a patient in the open heart unit who is very sick and not doing well. Or maybe that family has been a little rough on me. Or maybe I just came back from a meeting at a hospital, which there are just plenty of meetings to go to, and maybe I didn't get something that I really wanted, like, a raise or a new physician assistant or whatever the issue of the day may be. But I may come into the operating room that day just a little bit more tense. Obviously never risking the patient, but Lori and Lois know that I'm human. We all are human. Which leads me to, I have a prop up here, one of my favorite metaphors, okay, and that is an orange. So if I were to ask, and I got somebody special to ask today, my 10-year-old's waiting for this. If I were to ask you, Julia, you want to stand up, honey, so everyone can see how beautiful you are? There you go. Julia, if I squeeze an orange, what comes out? Juice. Why? Because that's what's inside. You see, it doesn't matter if it's raining out. It doesn't matter if it's sunny. It doesn't matter if it's a good day or a bad day. When you squeeze this orange, what comes out is juice, because that's what's inside. So you have to ask all yourselves here today, what's inside of you? What's inside of you? If you have anger inside, when you get squeezed, anger will come out. If you have worry or anxiety or sadness, then that is what will come out when you get squeezed. But if you have peace, contentment, and understanding, chances are when you get squeezed, that is what will come out. And so all of this leads to that concept of that inner candle that we're talking about. I have a candle here too. Should I try to light it? We'll take one shot at this. Hopefully it won't set off the smoke detectors. Ah, it's a little windy. Take one more shot. There goes the smoke detector. I stole this from our chandelier at the house. Bonnie's brother, like, I can't believe he took that. The candle. I tell my two daughters, and I've told them forever, that God has given them two candles. One they hold in their hands, and the other they hold in their hearts. Now that outer candle can and will get blown out 4, 5, 6, 10 times a day. Someone may say something to you that hurts your feelings. You may see something on the news that makes you sad. You may learn that a friend is sick. You may lose your job or fail a test. A patient may die in the operating room. But no matter how often that no matter how often that outer candle gets blown out, I tell them that they should never, never let that inner candle flicker, not even for a moment. So, as we leave here today, I want you all to think about your inner candle. I want you to look around, whether it's here or when you get home, and I want you to look at your spouse, your husband, your wife, your mom, your dad, your children, your friends. And I want you to really think about what's truly important to you. And most of all, I want you to think about how to keep this inner candle lit. Think about these three very simple concepts of eating, exercise, and particularly emotion. And never, never let that inner candle get blown out, not even for a moment. God bless you and thank you.